This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppy, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. In the last episode, we spoke to Rosemary Wilson and Rachel Boza, who talked about virtual self-management care while you're waiting for entrance into a pain clinic. They both talked about their research project and how it helped people who are waiting to get into a pain clinic do some self-management over virtually. So if you're one of those people who are suffering with chronic pain and are waiting to get into a pain clinic, then check out this episode on our Spotify or Apple feed. So you've heard me say many times on this podcast that the studies have shown that Canadian Forces members or veterans have suffered from chronic pain twice that of the Canadian population. But within that study, it also indicates that women veterans suffer chronic pain twice that of the male counterparts. Now, how does that impact women in the service and out the service? How does that impact them for treatments? To explore this topic more in depth, I'm joined by Luc Hebert, who's a professor at Laval University, and he's also our host on the French version of the Most Painful Podcast. Luc, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom.
And then I'm also joined by Hélène Lucera, who is the co-chair for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence Advisory Council for Veterans and is also completing her PhD on military identity. And she's been on the show before, and she's got a wealth of knowledge. Hélène, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom.
I think this is going to be an excellent discussion because there's a lot of wealth of knowledge between the two of you. But Luc, offline, we were talking a little bit about how these research projects are conducted and how these numbers, with both males and females, how they're gathered. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Allô, Hélène. J'espère que tu vas bien.
Hello, Luc.
That's a very good question, Tom, because, whenever we do studies on women veteran or women in the CAF, we'll look at the percentage of women in the Canadian Armed Forces, for example, which is about 14 to 16%. And when we do a study and we're having a cohort with, 12 to 14% of women, then we're happy. But the problem is we don't have most of the time a sufficient number of women participants to be able to answer some of the questions we may have and that are very essential and very critical for the health of women. So I think what we're missing right now, and if you look at the literature of the past 15 to 20 years, we don't have a significant number or enough women in all the studies that have been conducted with military population. And this is not unique to the Canadian Armed Forces. So I think this is a big flaw, and eventually what we should be doing is studies that do focus on the health of women, veterans, and CAF members so that we would have enough participants to be able to answer the critical questions that we have and for which we still don't have the answers.
It's interesting what you're saying, Luc, because in 2020, Megan Nicole Poole did a scoping review on that topic, and she's exactly saying that. The gap in the literature is exactly what she pointed out.
Yeah, and I think, like Hélène, we've talked offline as well, too. I mean, there's differences there, too, right? When a woman is suffering with chronic pain in service or out of service compared to a male. And I mean, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that from your studies and what you've talked to when you were doing your research project on identity.
Well, what I was surprised at first, it was that people don't necessarily talk about their chronic pain right away. They will talk about other issues because pain is so normalized that they're not necessarily presenting themselves as people living with chronic pain. So this is one of the first things that I've noticed with my own research. But also I was surprised with the demographics also about the women veterans that are living with chronic pain. The demographics that have been identified by the Research Directorate of Veterans Affairs in 2018 showed that women are between 45 and 54 years old, and a length of service of 10 to 19 years of service. And my question in my head was like, is it because I think it's a bit old, because I know some veterans that are suffering chronic pain, but they're really young, but they're not showing here. So is it because, like I was saying, they're waiting after the service to identify that they're living with chronic pain, or they were in the service and they were identified as living with chronic pain? And I think there's a gap here when people are willing to identify themselves living with that chronic pain. I think that needs to be looked at for sure in research.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Hélène, and I think we should try to make every effort we can to launch studies, comprehensive studies, longitudinal studies on women veterans, and maybe even having longitudinal studies about the transition from the military life to the civilian life. And I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but when you look at the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs, they launched on November 2nd in 2021 such a comprehensive study on women veterans that was including several topics. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, but I think that's the type of initiative that we should launch, not only with VAC, but maybe with CAF and maybe at CPCOE.
Yeah, Hélène. So I think that's a good comment. Yeah, that's a good comment on that one. And because I think it's important, Luc, that we need to get these studies that start looking at the specific, do we call it targets? Do we call it, who are we actually looking at? Because, Hélène, you've told me many times, there is a difference, right? When compared to a male who's suffering from pain and a female from suffering pain. And maybe you can, touch on two of those. So two questions. One is answer Luc's question on the study from the Senate committee, and then maybe answer that one too, what the differences are between the male and females suffering from pain.
Well, first of all, I think Luc is right. If at the government level we're realizing that we don't have enough information related to that population, then we need to do something, because they're suffering, and they're still suffering in silence, and they're almost invisible in the health system. So we need to do something about that. And like I said, we need to understand also how people what's the representation of pain for that population. Are they willing to say that I'm in pain? And there's a lot of stigma that goes with that, because a lot of women veterans, what I saw and what I read, and also I listened to a podcast in the US, and they identified that a lot of in-service women or after service, they have not been validated in their own experience. So if they're talking about pain and people are dismissing them, well, for sure, they're not going to say, and they're not going to be out there and say, well, I'm living with chronic pain. No, because even my pain was not recognized. We saw, and I read, and even in my own experience as a researcher, I had one of my participants who said to me that she was not believed. She was so in pain because she was raped in the system by his own peers, and she went to the medical group, and all people that were at the MIR, they were saying, well, it's not that bad. It's in your head. Maybe you can just go on and just suck it up, which it's impossible when you think about it. So if they cannot be recognized as people living with pain, how can we just do something different for them?
Yeah, that's very interesting what you're saying, Hélène, and you're absolutely right, because when you look at the difference between men and women, we know that the physical and mental health and the treatment of those injuries, illnesses, they should be approached differently between men and women. So there are some particularities between these two groups, and we tend to assume that the findings we have with men veterans or men CAF members are transferable to women, which is not true at all. So, even when you look at the professional and economic aspects of women veterans' lives, it's different, So we tend to forget that. We tend to pool all the veterans together, which is fine depending what the question is, but that means that we do not control for that very important variable that is the biological sex or genetics sex.
And that's really interesting because I know that, when you're doing training or when you're doing specific tasks related to the military, yes, for sure, there are going to be injuries that are going to be related to that. But if you add up something like a person who's living with menstrual pain or something, and you add this up to the normal pain, I would say that it's related more to training, and you add up on top of that migraines or headaches, chronic fatigue, it's all things that are just adding up, but it's never looked at all at the same time. It's like if you have back pain, you're going to look at back pain, but everything can be related. And like you said, the biological portion of women, which is giving birth, menopause, for example, has something to do with that for sure.
Being in charge of the family,
Being in charge of the family.
looking at the members of the family. This is something that's, whether we like it or not, this is the reality. A women CAF member.
Yeah, that's something Hélène and I talked about offline as well too, right? And honestly, it's the old saying is one may know something, but we may not fully understand it, or we see it, but we don't really see it. You know what I mean? And I think that you're right, Luc, and that's so important. I mean, Hélène, with your research, you've talked to different veterans, both males and females. Maybe that's something you can kind of share with the audience, is, maybe bring that awareness. So what is the difference when you have, a female serving member who's suffering from chronic pain and has a family?
Well, that's interesting because also what I've realized is that the relation to the family is a bit different when you're talking about the Anglophone community versus the Francophone community. For the female veteran that I interviewed, they were all in position of caring for children, and their own needs were the last one to be met, for sure. So they were taking care of everything. And for the people that I did my study on, those women said to me, "There's no way my husband or my spouse will take care of me if I'm in pain." It's like he's not going to be there for me to provide my medication, to make sure that I can go to an appointment or something like that. So there were network of support was not there for them, compared to the opposite for women on the Anglophone side, where the community thinking is more tight, I think, and people rely a lot on each other to help each other. And in what I saw in the last research that I was looking at, it's exactly that. What they're saying is also that women, veteran, most of them will be either in a position of caring, or they're going to be even more in a difficult position because they're going to be separated, divorced, and their social support network is very weak.
It's interesting, Hélène, and I'm wondering, my understanding is that the women feel that it's normal. That's my role. It's normal. Maybe that's because they're used to push harder. That's how they've been trained in the Canadian Armed Forces to reach the same level of performance sometime. So I think it's, maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, but I got the feeling that they assume that this is normal, which should not be the case.
Exactly.
But it's hard for them to stop and say, listen, this is not normal. Okay, I'm doing maybe a little bit too much.
And it's also the wrong thinking that if I'm not doing it, nobody will do it. But we know that it's not true, but yes, they rely on themselves instead of asking for help.
Yeah, and I mean and I wonder when we talk about the differences there, let's take a step forward and look at a pain program in an interdisciplinary pain clinic, and say you have a cohort of veterans, right? And there's been studies done, that we're familiar with, that have looked at veterans going through a pain program. Do we then have to, is the differences being accounted? Because mindset is huge. We have military mindset to deal with, right? Then we have, as you just mentioned, Hélène, and Luc, you touched on it too. You have where women feel this is a normal way to be acting, which is I would suggest a mindset or a thought. Hélène, you could correct me if I'm wrong. And then you add to that just the whole thing about pain. So I'm wondering, do we take a step forward and say, okay, well, if we have a group of veterans together in a cohort, do we have to approach things differently as well instead of just doing it under, assuming that everything is equal? Not equal, that's not the right term, but when we're providing the education or going through the program, do we have to make maybe the veterans themselves aware and maybe the clinicians aware too of some of those differences, mindset and how to push through pain?
But I would like to know for sure what's the representation of pain for a person? Because for example, myself or Luke, it's not going to be represented in the same way. For one person being in pain is going to be I'm experiencing an 8 out of 10 of back problem. But for another person who's dealing with severe migraines, and I would say a woman, for example, she's going to say it's a 10 out of 10 or even a 12. But then who's capable of, make the difference between, is it a lesser pain, a better pain? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's really hard to measure. So, but if the person itself is saying, for me, my representation of pain is when I'm at the 5 out of 10, it's like, I feel no pain. But in the normal world, society, a 5 out of 10 is already too high to sustain a daily living. So for me, I think we need to understand how they perceive their pain and the difference also between, because I think there's stigma in there. Is it because it's a woman, it's normal that she will have, like, for example, pelvic pain? Probably not. But for men, maybe it's like a way of thinking that, it goes, with the fact that maybe she gave birth and blah, blah, blah. But this is like, it's stigma, but I'm pretty sure that there's something to look at, and it's going to give us an indicator for sure that can we specifically take differences to address pain between men and women.
I think your question, Tom, is extremely interesting and relevant because nobody really asked that question. Yes, we have the same mindset whether we're in women or men military. But when it comes to treating male and female veterans, I think we first need to recognize that there are differences between male and female veterans. This is the first thing we need to do. Okay, let's assume it. And then we have to know what those differences are. And that's what we don't know very well right now. We may make several hypotheses, but I think this is something to address. And when you're talking about, self-education program, self-management program for veterans, I'm not sure that this has been, well addressed. And this is something that could be the topic of a very interesting study. Okay.
Measuring pain is one thing, but we need to understand, and I heard that in the podcast, the US podcast, the doctor said all pain is real pain. And I think this is the key, because even you cannot treat like at a percentage and we're using tools to measure, but we need to start at the point that all pain is real pain. But how does it translate on the women's side and on a men's side?
Yeah, pain is a very complex concept, and your perception will depend upon your past experience, your lived experience, your culture, even your race sometime,
Yeah.
So I mean, and the tools sometime have been designed, the outcome we use to measure the perception of pain are for the general population at large, not specifically for military, and definitely not specifically for men or women.
Yeah, and that goes right back to how we started this podcast, right? Is if we're looking at doing research and we want to kind of dive into the differences, then I would suggest it's almost in the same line when we're doing research on veterans. We can't do it through a civilian lens, right? Because there's a nuance, and we see that in a lot of the literature that's out there. We can, I think the three of us can probably read a literature and say, good research, but it was done through a civilian lens. So that goes back to the start of the question. If we're going to look at differences, we need to look through the lens of that individual. So if we're looking at a pain program, military mindset is one, but we also have to look at the differences that you talked about, Alain, too, right? So they account for it. But I think, like Luke, I mean, this is what you do at the university, but I mean, the standard of care for and we look at a lot of the research, be it on anything, diabetes or cholesterol or whatever. I mean, it's just everything seems to be lumped into like this is, it's not separated down between genders from what I understand, right? So, I mean, this is not just our issue that we deal with the veterans, but it's a bigger issue. So I think it'd be great to start it somewhere because I think it's important to look at those differences.
Yeah, no, you're right, Tom. But in many studies in the civilian population, what they do sometimes, they will control for the gender, which is not probably the best way to do it. But this is not something we do necessarily with the research we do with CAF members or with veterans. So this is something to keep in mind.
Well, I guess that what they're doing at the standing committee right now is going to be like a really, really good start to look at all the data that will come out from this report.
Yeah, and I think we could dive into this more because I know we've talked about this offline, and there's some very interesting topics that or discussion points that Hélène had, but unfortunately we're out of time. So, but I think Luc, I think you're going to do this on the French podcast, from what you've been telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a topic that will be covered in the season 2 of the French podcast. Hélène will probably do it with me, and I'm expecting maybe to have one more female veteran because I think this is too much important for, not taking the time we need to talk about that and not be afraid of asking the right questions. We need to ask these questions, the type of question you asked us today, Tom, because that's the starting point.
Yeah, and that's what we like to do on this podcast, ask the hard questions so that we get the good information out and evidence-based information. So I look forward to Luc's doing an excellent job on the podcast. And so if you haven't listened to it, just go on the Spotify or Apple feed and you can look on our English version and you'll see the link going over to the French version. And so thank you, Luc, and thank you, Hélène, for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Merci, Tom.
The next show, we're going to we talk to some veterans. We just completed the Alpine Challenge in Whistler. It's a program to help veterans with chronic pain. It's not just about a hike. It's actually about providing education on pain and mindset. So I have a number of veterans in to talk about that. And for feedback on the show or for information on chronic pain, you can visit our website, veteranschronicpain.ca. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Chronic Pain COE and on Instagram at chronicpain_COE. And if you have any topic ideas, just write into us and we'll get the experts on and we'll talk about it. So once again, Hélène and Luc, thanks for being on the show. And to everybody else, keep the hope alive and stay safe.
The Most Painful Podcast is produced for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence by Story Studio Network and Eye Contact Productions.